Guys, welcome back to another case study. Meet the 22-year-old who's making 15K a month appointment setting. I know I probably got you with the title there, but it's a pretty insane result. Josh has come through a referral. As you guys might have seen on the channel, Naveed as well referred Josh to the training program. And it's amazing to see how quickly the results have unfolded for you to go from very skeptical to, is it only like 2 or 3 months actually setting that you achieve the result?
Yeah, this is the end of the second month, so going into the third.
So it's insane. So in 60 days, you've gone from no job, well, being on the job to doing 15K a month at 22 years old. So it's absolutely insane. So didn't give Josh the chance to introduce himself, but this is Josh, if you didn't know already by now. And yeah, as I do with all the other case studies in the channel, I want to dive into his story, his thought process, what he's learned. So ultimately, you guys can understand how to navigate the space better, as well as explore the results we get for the RSA. So first of all, let's start way before we actually met and what you tried
Mm,
online, what you were doing before high ticket sales, your job working at DocuSign, and other
mm.
different companies as well, and all the way up to how you sort of be getting results and your thought process from there.
Yeah. Thanks, Connor. Well, yeah, I just want to say thanks for having me. I think this has been a long time in the making. Pretty surreal, like just soaking it all in. Because, yeah, like I used to watch these case studies before I was a student, right? And you almost think like, oh, it'd be pretty cool to be there one day. So it's awesome that I'm here. But yeah, like a little bit about me, right? My story. I think for most of us here in Australia, like story's pretty standard, right? We go to school, finish school, and you go down the normal like uni or tradey path, right? You pretty much pick a trade or you go to uni, study something, right? So for me, that was pretty much the same, right? I didn't know what I wanted to do out of school, so went down the normal sort of uni route, right? I ended up studying like business. Fun fact, Connor, I'm not sure if you knew this, but I was actually studying law initially, right? During like my first year. So I
Wow.
did that for about a year and I was like, yeah, like this isn't it, man. It's just not for me, right? I wanted to like find something that, would kind of test myself, challenge myself, but I think more importantly, like something that I'd get rewarded for, right? Because you hear and you see a lot of the people, that go down that path before you, right? So I think that's kind of when I fell, into sales, right? Because I was in uni, was getting a part-time job, and I think you always say this as well, right? But just to link it back, you're one conversation away from changing the trajectory of your life, right? So I pretty much like, had a mate who was in sales, fell into that, and then, before you know it, that's when I found myself in tech sales, right? I was like, look, this is a booming industry. Let's give this a good crack, right? And I remember starting that about, a year and a half ago, right? So I was still in uni at the time and, I was juggling like work and I was like, you know what, let's just take on full-time work, right? Why not? I think I was 19 at the time, but yeah, like, I feel like I've learned, I've grown so much throughout that role. And ultimately, that was like, I'd say a very formative part of my career. Like, I look back at it now and it's like, I've been in high ticket sales for about 6 months, but I feel like a lot of the growth happened before, right? I even stepped into this industry. So, I think that's when, obviously met Navid, met a few of the other boys, and you hear about kind of the online space, right? And you're a little bit unsure initially, right? And I guess linking back to what you said about the skepticisms there, I think initially, right, I come from like a very traditional background, right? It's almost very much like finish school, go to uni, get a degree, get a job, right? And that there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, right? I enjoyed it. In fact, it was a big part of my life for a year and a half, but you hear about like, all these people making money online and you almost question like, is this real? Right. That was kind of my thought initially, right? But having one of my closest mates at the time, Navid, right, like in work, he made that transition. Just seeing him, make his first money online, that's when everything changed for me. Like,
Mm. Yeah, I mean that would have been a huge breakthrough because I remember uh, you referenced our onboarding call when you sent me the message when you actually got that result, and so I
mm,
went back and checked it, and I do remember exactly how I felt hearing what you were saying. I remember you were quite skeptical, even once you were in as a client. You're like, yeah, I'm just not really too sure. Like, I'm not, yeah, like you just weren't too certain overall, which is
Mm,
more valid considering the state of the space at the moment or making money online in
mm.
general. Like, it's very difficult, it's very unknown, and a lot of people like to stick to traditional route. So, even seeing Naveed, someone who you're working with close to the time, getting results, even still, then there was skepticism. Like, what do you think you were most skeptical about at that time, even though that you were still in the training and you're just starting?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'd say the biggest thing about the online space, and you probably hear this a lot, is it's really hard to believe it when you don't have anyone around you doing it, right? So for like the longest time, you see, people on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube doing it, but until you meet them in the flesh, I feel like that's when, that belief is almost broken, right? And for me, that's obviously someone that I knew in person, right? But I think even coming into the RSA and seeing all these other people that have done it before, right? Like you said initially, it's hard for you to have that sort of strong conviction, but I feel like as you step foot into this space and you're surrounded by like, there's 10s, 20, like there was 30, probably 30 case studies before I even came into it, right? Like all that social proof is there and that builds up your belief, right? Which means I feel like over time, Connor, you would have seen like you start taking more action, right? You show up more and you're like, all right, this is going to happen. Everyone's been through that same initial phase where they're unsure and they're not really certain. So I feel like it was almost something that I had to kind of overcome initially, right?
Yeah, that makes total sense. So you got on a call with me. I looked at our sales call at the time. I was in the London penthouse, had my hair blowing everywhere, and just
Mm.
for some reason, I just looked like
Yeah.
I didn't. I think I had like 8 calls booked that day, so I had a lot going on from
Mm.
memory. Um, so you decided to join. You decided to trust me. You came in the onboarding call. You looked at the resources. What was the next steps from there? Because it wasn't all hunky dory. It wasn't perfect. You didn't have everything figured out, and it was quite
Mm.
overwhelming for a bit before you started to see the
Mm.
uptick. So, what were your thoughts going into it? What did you struggle with? What was confusing to you? And how did you lead from going to that state of mind and those results to landing the offer that you're on now?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the biggest thing initially for me first, like you said, it's just about breaking those limiting beliefs, right? Because I even remember on our call, I was asking you, like, what type of person is successful or like what kind of experience do they have prior? Like, you almost want to set up the archetype of someone who would be able to succeed, right? Maybe they've got like this experience or they've got this personality trait. I feel like when I came in, I realized as you see all the case studies and everyone inside the community, like people have come from all different walks of life, right? You've got people, who went to school, others who are in trades. Like, there really isn't like a set background, right, in terms of the people that are successful. And I feel like just over time, like with the training, right, sort of going through all of that, following the steps, following this procedure, I think you realize over time that you don't really have to reinvent the wheel, right? And I think with the right guidance, like I had to think about this actually when I was training today, Connor, when we are preparing for this, right? But I feel like a big thought for me was just knowing that I had you in my corner, like someone who's been there, done that, and not like, a lot of the other, I feel like gurus out there, right? That, might show or represent that lifestyle. But when it comes down to the nitty gritty, like it's almost really hard to know that you can lean on someone with genuine expertise, right? So knowing that, I could attend like weekly training calls, right? Q&A calls and any questions I had, but even any more pressing like mindset stuff, right? In terms of my own limiting beliefs, I feel like being able to come to you and just get that off my chest, like that did so much for me that like even looking back in hindsight now, I don't think you could even attribute like certain value to because that would just almost iron out any sort of doubt I had in my mind and it just let me, keep putting in the work every single day, right? And I feel like initially for me, Connor, answering your question there, like a lot of it was just the boring stuff, right? Like, doing the networking, making sure, I'm active in the community, attending, all the trainings initially, right? And just really putting myself out there, right? But I think what comes with that over time is, you always see this, but people are watching, right? Like you always say, like everyone in the space, it's quite small, right? And word of mouth does spread. So I like to think, you put in the hard yards, you put in the work, even though it might seem like small one percenters, and that's ultimately, how you end up landing an offer and even a really good offer, right? So I'd say that's what it comes down to for sure.
I agree. And so you're making the rounds, you're doing the imperfect actions, you're doing the stuff, you're showing up to coaching calls, you're doing all the things. Then you found the opportunity that you're on now. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, so pretty much I want to say it was about like 3 months after I joined, right? In terms of like the networking, the just applying for offers. And yeah, I actually ended up getting an interview for one of Australia's biggest offers, right? So it was pretty groundbreaking for me initially, right? Because just to give you a bit of context, right, I was still working my normal job at the time, right? So a lot of it for me was like, how am I gonna, dedicate my time? How am I gonna make this happen? But I think, when it comes down to it, right, like I think we've talked about this before, but even in other trainings, like sometimes you only get certain opportunities that, they don't come very often, right? So you almost got to take what's in front of you. But I'd say, that none of that would have been possible if I didn't have the people around me, right? If I didn't have you in my corner to almost ground me and like take the imperfect action. Because without any of that, none of this would have happened, right? Like a lot of people, that do come in the community or do join the space, they might, stop after a week or two or even after a month, right? And I think you just have to almost understand that this is going to be a long process, right? But you just need to have conviction. Like I used to think about this, Connor. You almost need to have like blind faith, right? It sounds really cliche, but when you're first new to this, like you don't know how this next 6 months are going to play out, right? But you just got to know that you're going to do your best every day, right? That sounds super cliche, but I feel like now I've seen the feedback and the reality kind of catching up that that's pretty much it, right? You just got to put in the hard yards day in, day out, regardless of, I guess, what outcome you get, right?
It sounds a bit cliche because the same rules all apply to the same successful people. They all say the same stuff again and again
Mm,
and again and again. It's cliche because, again,
mm,
it's repeated successful patterns and behaviors from people who've already achieved what you wanted to achieve.
mm,
So you came up against a lot of people, I'm sure, for that role, considering it is one of the biggest accounts in Australia. A lot of the guys inside the RSA are on it as well. They're doing very, very well. You got Naveed coming off the back end of what was like a 34, 35K month, something
yeah.
ridiculous like that. So one of the top performers on the account. Do you know how many people you went up against for the interview process?
That's a really good question. I actually don't know, but the whole interview process was probably the longest one I've been through. I still remember I did it like early November, and I think I heard back like early December. So took 3 or 4 weeks, but yeah, I'm sure I was up against a lot of people. It was definitely competitive for sure. That's what I heard. Mm,
It's very interesting. So you landed the account, you came in, and I'm sure December might have been a bit of a low period. There's not much really going on. It's
mm,
Christmas, it's New Year's. Most offers in the info space don't really push things very hard. So I'm assuming December
mm.
was a bit of a lull month. Not much was going on for you.
Yeah, so like December, I was still doing onboarding, right? So I didn't fully start pretty much until January. So lucky enough, yeah.
Okay.
Mm,
And so your first month heading into it, doing the setting,
mm.
how much did you end up earning that month in commissions? Do you know?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it was about 4.5, 5 grand. So definitely very different to my second month now. Yeah.
Okay. So what changed from your first month to your second month, do you think?
Really good question. I'll try not to I'll try not to ramble on too long for this one, but look, if I was to break it down, I'd say there are a few key pillars. The first one, I always talk a lot about this, right? Even with the boys like on the account now, right? Because we're all trying to replicate each other's like actions, inputs, even mindset, right? I think the biggest thing, man, and once again, sounds super cliche, but it's all in the mindset, right? So during that first month, right, obviously reality wasn't really giving me the feedback that I wanted, right? Like I wasn't performing as well as I would have ideally hoped. But I think the biggest thing, right, is just having blind belief like in the process, right? Like I said earlier, just knowing that every day you got to show up, right? And what does that look like in my day to day, right? Like you've got your dials, you've got your core reviews, you've got your non-negotiables, right? And like it almost, it doesn't matter how you feel, right? But fact of the matter is you got to get the work done because, in 3, 6, 12 months down the line, like reality isn't going to care, right? And like I feel like you hear that a lot, right? Hormozy talks about it, Chris Williamson talks about it, but genuinely like input equals output, right? But it has to occur over a long enough period. And even during that first month, Connor, like I just want to kind of share, I was pretty much in the trenches, right? Like it wasn't something that just kind of flicked overnight. Like I remember for a lot of that first month, I had those same doubts. I had those same like skepticism coming back in. I was like, look, like, is this going to be able to work? Like, I've pretty much taken a cut from what I was doing before, right, in terms of the job. So, just having I think such strong conviction is really important, right? But this is one thing I just wanted to share as well. Like having a support network around you of people that you can lean on is so important as well, right? So for me personally, just to share, that was my missus, right? And that was also some of my really close mates that I had around me that I could always lean on if I was, having a bad day, right? Because at the end of the day, you need, people around you to almost lift you up, right? When you can't do that for yourself. And I think tying that back in with the RSA, right? I think a lot of
Yeah,
the times when you're going through a tough period and you're almost in the trenches, right? As one would say, whether that's applying, for job roles or even on an offer that you're on at the moment, like it's never going to be sunshines and rainbows. And what really kept me going, just to kind of share, is understanding that like almost every season of life that you're in, it's just one chapter, right? Like it's never going to be like that forever. And I'm sure you'd understand, Connor, as well. I see you nodding, but you realize when you're in the moment, you're like, this is going to go on for like months or weeks, or, you're almost counting down the days, right? But fact of the matter is, as long as you push and persevere through, then I feel like you'll come out the other end almost thanking yourself that you never gave up.
100%. I agree. And so you spoke about quite a few things there of how you went from, 4 or 5K monthly commissions to 15K monthly commissions and appointment set, which was really, really high, by the way.
Mm,
Uh, I might have heard around the rounds, maybe you told me, but
mm.
based off your commissions and your performance, is that like the fastest or highest amount of cash collected for an appointment setter in the company's history?
Yeah, I didn't actually know this, but yeah, pretty much broke like fastest to 100 grand cash collected, but also just the setting record in general. So
Which is
pretty
crazy.
exciting. Yeah,
So
yeah.
you spoke about mindset dictates those results. Is there anything else that you've observed personally during that transformation that really separated the average versus like the high performers in terms of your role and how well you've done? Breaking company records is no small feat. So
Mm.
what are some other differences and things you've observed that kind of separates the two?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's something I've been trying to think about more recently, right? Because I think, getting a good result is great and all, but a lot of it is, how can you maintain that same standard, right? Like you never want to get ahead of yourself. And I feel like that's something I've actually been thinking about, quite a lot over the past few weeks. So it's a really good question. I think one thing, I'm talking to like, a lot of the other boys about, I think just the standards that you kind of hold yourself to day in, day out. And like, just to break that down on like a macro and micro level, like kind of the standard that you're willing to live your life in, right? Like the bare minimum, right? Because pretty much like one of my mentors always said this, but pretty much your life is just a reflection of your standards, right? So what that means on like the day to day, like, what does your routine look like? What do your inputs look like? Like what does the system that you have set up for yourself look like, right? Because fact of the matter is we're all humans, right? Like I'll wake up in the morning, I'll want to just scroll on my phone all day and like, chuck on Netflix, watch YouTube. But I think understanding that like you have that greater purpose, it sounds really cliche, but if you want to be the best, then you need to like put in the actions, right, of someone who would be the best, right? So that's something that I always thought about. And just being able to hold myself to that, right? Like it doesn't matter, Connor. I think feel like in sales, it relates a lot to life, but you're never going to have a great day, right? Like not every day is going to be a great day. And ultimately, you can never let that dictate what you do on a day-to-day basis, right? Just because you've had a bad day doesn't mean you're going to go to Macca's and, order takeout or just kick your feet up. Like, I feel like what really got me through even, the first 2 months, but even the whole 1.5 years working in corporate before is like, no matter what kind of day you have, it genuinely shouldn't dictate the level of input and the level of standard you hold yourself to, right? Because over a long enough time horizon, like the trajectory will map out in like an upwards trajectory, if that makes sense. Trying to be a bit visual here. Maybe should
Yeah,
have got out the diagrams, but yeah, like I'd say that's what it comes down to for
that
sure.
makes sense. So
Mm,
most people uh, think that they're going to fall down to their expectations, but really at the end of the day, it's their standards. So I think that's really, really key. And I talk about that a lot. The reason why most people don't get success with making money online or any vehicle they choose, whether it's high ticket sales or anything else, is very much the standards and as well as the
mm,
identity that they hold as well, right?
mm,
The 5K a month guy or the guy that's never made money online does not act, do, and behave like the guy who makes 15K a month, just like you are now.
mm,
And, even your manager, Fonz, who, if you guys see on the channel, we did a bit of a podcast in Dubai with a
mm,
bunch of those guys. Even he observed again, it's just the mentality that you have, it's the
mm,
identity that you have. Like it's a killer mentality.
mm,
And that's why I
mm,
think most people need to realize about what's required to be successful with this is not just showing up, it's not just paying me money, it's not just getting access to information,
mm,
just having the support or the community. These things will add to your success, but ultimately, you have to be the person who's actually going to get the result, right? It's very, very, very key that you take that responsibility and have that standard. So I think it's good to observe that. And so I'm very, very curious, kind of changing the direction of the conversation for a second. So
mm,
you worked in tech sales, right? You've gone from
mm,
traditional sales to high ticket sales. What do you think have
mm.
been the key differences? What have been the changes? What have you noticed?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'd say the industry is just so different, right? So back in tech sales, I was predominantly B2B, so talking to other business owners. And I'd say a lot of, the high ticket sales space with info product, like BizOp, a lot of it's B2C, right? So I feel like what comes with that, a lot of this will be transferable, right, in terms of personality, general speaking style. But yeah, I would say honestly, the actual selling style is very different, right, in terms of like the psychology, also the frameworks that you follow. But I think what comes with that is like it's very much, a very linear transition, right? For a lot of people who are working in traditional sales, I feel like you pretty much have all the bread and butter skills you need is just being able to take that leap in the first place, right? Because the biggest thing, Connor, for me was even when I heard about the space, everything in B2B and even in tech sales in corporate, it's all like base plus commissions, right? But as I'm sure you'd know, with the high ticket sales space, like the main difference, right, is that we operate off commissions only. So that's a double-edged sword, right? Because you've got to basically work very hard for your results in the end. But in saying that, I'd say it really ties back down to that killer mentality you mentioned earlier. You're not really paid by the hour, so you have to like push yourself. You have to get after it, right? Because no one's going to do that work for you. So I'd say that's the main difference.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you'd say there's a huge incentive change.
Mm,
And I would agree because like I do have traditional salespeople come to me quite commonly, like a lot of the time. And the biggest concern, the biggest objection I get all the time is, Connor, I know how to sell. I've been selling for 3 or 4 or 5 years in corporate. Just give me a job or just teach me how to get a job. I'm curious to hear your perspective on that. Don't have to give it from my side of like, I want to give what Connor wants me to say. I'm
mm,
curious in your
mm.
genuine perspective, going from tech sales to this, like, do you feel like you could have done all this on your own?
Really good question. And to be brutally honest with you, probably not, right? And I feel like what you just described, Connor, like naturally I shared some of those same beliefs, right? If I'm just going to be completely honest, right? You think, you've been in the industry, you've done sales, regardless of what industry you're from, right? But I think coming into such a new space where like a lot of it is uncharted and a lot of it, requires that right guidance, like you need to lean on people, that have walked the walk before, as you have, right? Like such a wealth of experience. I feel like even initially, I remember in my onboarding call, like I can't remember if it was you saying or even in one of the first trainings, right? Like we talked about just almost you have to be a student again, right? Like it doesn't matter how much experience you have. And you would say this, and I remember one of the first like case study interviews I watched with Kashi, right? Like you have to just be a student. Like, as good as you think you are, like coming into something new, like you really don't know it all, right? And almost I feel like one mentality shift, and you just reminded me that I feel like really helped was understanding that you're new to this and you should be so open to like the feedback and guidance, right? Of Connor, of other people in the community, because chances are they've been in your exact same shoes before, right? So I feel like a lot of that, it's an ego thing. Like you've just got to almost leave it on the ground, right? Like it doesn't matter how good you are. To be honest, at the end of the day, if you're starting anything new, chances are you've got more than 10 things to learn from the people around you. So definitely.
Absolutely. I think a common quote I always come back to is that you don't know that you don't know. And very much across the board with my most successful clients, I say it every single time, they
Mm,
leave the ego at the door. They just do what I tell them to willingly with blind faith and just trust that they'll eventually get there. I see my most successful clients do that ultimately. So again, if you're watching this, you're considering joining the community, that's what I expect of you. If you're coming into this game, maybe you've got a bit of experience. Maybe you've been in traditional sales before. Maybe you've tried different business models. Maybe you've done e-com. Maybe you've done a course in high ticket sales before. Whatever it is, clean slate is where we need to be met because when you do that, you follow the steps properly and you don't let your ego get in the way of you doing the steps impractically and having all the doubt and hesitations really kind of mess up the process because you think you know better than you do and you start putting steps in the process that shouldn't be there and so on, so on, so on. It's a cycle as always time. I've seen it repeated across, 250 clients by now. So Josh brings up a great point. And so, how has life changed from traditional sales, tech sales, to what you're doing now? Like, what do your days look like? What's the culture like? What are you
mm.
experiencing, the training? Like, what does your day-to-day look like?
Yeah, really good question. I would say the difference is crazy, right? If you were to sort of talk to me 6 months ago and tell me that I'd be in this team, I'd be in this sort of environment, literally so hungry, getting after it every day, I'd probably say you're crazy, right? Like, because I wouldn't believe it. But now that I've been in it for about 2 months, I would say, yeah, like day to day is very different, right? So I'm no longer making the commute, into the city, right? Because I'm working fully remotely from the comfort of my own home every single day, which that in itself, I feel like is such a luxury, right? Because I used to look at that and be like, dude, it'd be nice to be able to, work from the comfort of your own home. I feel like that's such a, difference maker. But, just being, I feel like, and this ties into the RSA or whatever offer that you're in, like genuinely being around like-minded people in this space is honestly, I feel like the key to the lock that everyone's looking for, right? Because you go into this, right? Like even before I joined this offer, right? Just to share, I feel like a lot of it, there's a lot of doubt and like when you're in it, you're still unsure, and you're surrounded by people, that are all getting up to that high standard, right? Like shout out boys in the offer, but they'll know who they are, right? But even the vid fonts, like you said, I feel like that is such a difference maker, and it honestly it makes it all like achievable, right? Because without it, if you're doing it by yourself, if you're trying to like find your feet, it's almost impossible. And just tying that back to the RSA as well, like if initially I didn't have the network of people around me, right? I don't feel like I would have the conviction built up over time to take the necessary action to really, you know, almost put in the work that you need to get to where you are, right? But I think just to circle back, I went off track a little bit. In terms of how things have changed, I feel like the lifestyle's so different now, right? There's so much freedom that comes with it. Like, even now, like I'm planning on, going to Southeast Asia later in the year, right? I
Yeah,
haven't done that yet, but the boys are flying out. We've got a team trip that's coming up, right? So that's going to be in Koh Samui, Thailand. But even just being able to work remotely, like as much as that's not the reason I do this, but having that as like an upside, like that's crazy, right? People dream about being able to travel and work at the same time. But I think now that it's on your front doorstep, it's almost like it makes all of it worth it, right? Like I said before, all those sleepless nights, all that doubt, all that uncertainty, like if you just push through and persevere, I promise you, I'm telling you from firsthand experience, it will be worth it.
absolutely. And tie back to what you were saying earlier about who you're surrounded by, community wise, on your team wise. It does push and raise the standard. And I think I've spoke about this many, many, many times in different case study interviews and YouTube videos and the community trainings, but exposure is one of the most invaluable things you can have because, like you said before, if no one around you, particularly in Australia, like it's very, very common in Australia, if you're watching the US, probably consider yourself lucky. It's more common over there. But in Australia, there's very few, if any, people that are actually doing this, like online internet money, high ticket sales, making money online. It's actually very rare that you find that. And the more you surround yourself with people who are actually doing what you want to do, the more it becomes real and the more it becomes possible. You used to work with someone who made, 35, 36K a month last month. Like it's fucking ridiculous,
Crazy.
right? At 23 or
Crazy.
22. So that now is your new threshold and your baseline, your standard. And if you're watching this, thinking that you can do it on your own, you can. But if you're surrounded by people who are exactly where you want to be, who are proof of concept, who can tell you what to do from where you have been, it greatly increases your chance of success, right? Having someone like myself who's been doing this for 5 years, right? I'm practically like an uncle, grandpa of the space at this point. I've seen every failure, every mistake you can make. I've experienced everything that you could possibly experience. I've made every mistake that one could ever make, and I've failed more times than any of my clients have ever tried. Imagine if you were surrounded by a group of people making 10K a month. What's not going to make you the fourth or the fifth, right? That's why having a community is so, so, so important, and why doing a training program or high ticket sales specifically gives you such an ease of access to that type of person and that caliber of person. Where else can you get that? You can start a marketing agency, you can start an e-com dropshipping store, you can do that type of stuff. But to get ready, easy access to people who are actually making money like that so quickly in droves is very, very, very rare. So the reason why I think high ticket sales is such a unique space and so valuable is you can not only be surrounded by people that are doing that around you, 10K a month, 20K a month, 30K a month, so on, communities, teams you work on, but you can also spend close proximity, just like you have yourself. I'm assuming your mentor that you quoted was, probably the guy you work for, right?
Mm,
As a lot of the clients come back to me and speak great things about him.
mm,
Um, you're surrounded by not only people making 10 to 20, 30K a month, you're surrounded by seven figure, multi seven figure, eight figure founders.
mm,
You get to see how they think, how they operate, how they behave. They teach you by sheer proximity. There is nothing more valuable than being able to spend time in proximity with millionaires, multimillionaires. In fact, most people never get to see millionaires in their entire life, right? Or meet
mm.
millionaires, multimillionaires. So I think that's super, super valuable. I'm curious in your thoughts.
Couldn't have said it more perfectly, honestly. Like, yeah, yeah, you can do it by yourself, right? But I feel like it just accelerates that process so much, right? Like, I like to link it back to this analogy. Why do we read in the first place, right? Like, we want to learn from those that came before us. So, why not just, learn off someone who's literally walked down your same road, your same path before, and it will literally save you so much time, right? And just to share as well, Connor, I'm not sure if you knew this, but I was actually on the fence even for a few months, right, before I joined, because I was looking like, oh, who's the right mentor? What should I do? And I'll be honest, I fell into that analysis paralysis, right? I was looking at other business models, about to do my own agency. Like, there's so much out there, right? Like you said, but I feel like when it comes down to it, right, and you make that decision that yes, you want to get into this space, but yes, you want to learn from someone who's been there before. I feel like it sounds cliche once again, but that was the light bulb moment that just flipped, right? Because that's when the actual journey starts, and that's when I feel like you really step into this new identity that you go through throughout your whole sales journey, right? But that never starts until I took that leap, right? And until I hopped on that call with you, because before that, this was all just in my own head. It was just thoughts, right? But the second I action that, that's when I feel like it all started, right? If I was to trace it back to that certain moment or point.
Important. So if you've been watching this for a while, I have so many people that have been watching the channel, watching the countless case studies here. Book on a call, have a chat, send me an Instagram DM. right? It's not going to hurt you, right? I'm not going to force you to do something you don't want to do. Because again, all these stories that you're likely telling yourself, just like Josh did, just like I did, just like all my other clients have, it may not be real in the first place, and it most likely isn't, right? And there's very few people that I found that actually can demonstrate this level of results in such a short amount of time in a long format capacity. This can't be faked, right? There's plenty of YouTube videos you can watch of me demonstrating knowing what I'm talking about, as well as these interviews, so on and so forth. It's very hard to fake that, right? So if after 30 plus hours of case studies you've already watched by this point and you're already sitting on the edge, we don't know what else to tell you. I think it's quite an interesting one. But I'm very, very curious because as I speak about all the time, high ticket sales, making money online is not some overnight thing. That's not some wishy-washy, amazing business model where you're just gonna flip a hat, flip a coin, and you're there. As someone who's become the top setter in record time for the company history, and that's a very big company as well, one of the biggest in Australia, what do you think it truly takes to be successful in this space?
Hmm. That's a really good question. Um, I feel like I can say all the cliche answers, right? So I'll get it off my chest first. But, obviously it takes hard work, right? You got to believe in the process, all of that shazazz, right? But I feel like going beyond that on the deeper level, right? This is something I used to hear a lot, like, and you hear it from like the top performers in sport, like MJ, Kobe, Connor, right? Like people who are in their own art craft, the best at what they do, right? And I feel like a common theme that echoes amongst all of them is yes, put in the work, put in the hard work, put in the effort, but just do whatever it takes, right? And I feel like that's what it boils down to because yes, it's about being the best, but what does it take to be the best, right? Like in terms of like the work ethic, like the mindset and everything like that. Like I feel like sometimes you get to a point where you're working, right? And obviously your body, you're fatigued, like all of the mental signals are almost telling you, maybe I should take a break, right? And the fact of the matter is maybe you should, right? Like maybe taking a break is the best thing for you, right? But I feel like when you get to that point where you genuinely want it so bad, right, that you literally think about it as you live and breathe and you think about it almost every waking second of the day, as cliche as that sounds once again, like if you want it that badly and you're willing to put in the work and do whatever it takes, then it's almost unreasonable that you don't get the outcome or result that you want, right? And I feel like to the normal person, that might sound a little bit like crazy, right? What I'm saying, do whatever it takes. But I feel like genuinely, Connor, that's like a standard I try and hold myself to because thing is, like, this is a 1% opportunity, right? I used to think about this, man, like the online space in our day and age. Like, if my parents or my mum had this opportunity, man, she would put in, I'm telling you, more effort than I did, right? Even me watching her do everything she's done to obviously, get me to where I am today, right? But I almost think like if we were in our parents' shoes, man, imagine the hard work that they would be putting into this, right? So you almost have to like flip the narrative and almost think about like, yeah, you have so much opportunity, but the question is like, what are you going to do about it, right? Because fact of the matter is like, there's so much out there that you can do, right? But there's also so many distractions as well, right? So I think that's what it boils down to. Like, how bad do you want it, and what are you willing to do, and what are you willing to sacrifice to get there?
I think that's some great observations, good points. I think number one, the quote that I very much embodied for my entire career and making money online in general when I took it seriously for the last 5 years. I think it's from a bodybuilder named Tom Platz. I think he's pretty
Mm,
big dude.
mm,
He says something along the lines of, "You have to want it as bad as you want to breathe." And to me, really, that is a non-negotiable. It really, really separates the 1% from the 99% and the guys who achieve the results and the guys who don't. And you spoke it through your words just then. That's generally what you
mm,
believe. Like you have
mm,
to want it as bad as you want to breathe. You have to, as this is going to sound very dramatic to a lot of people who aren't really about it, but it really is what's required to be successful. You have to wake up thinking about this stuff. You have to be thinking about it all the time. You have to be thinking, wishing, dreaming, hoping, doing. Like you have to be in it and you have to really truly integrate. You can't just hope, wish, and pray and just kind of have this very weak intention. It has to be all in, has to be all in or nothing. And it has to be all you talk about, all you think about. You think and breathe this stuff. Like this is where you have to be at. Yet a lot of people, as I spoke about before, the reason they're not successful is they treat this like it's just some thing that everybody can do. Yes, it's more accessible than ever. Yes, you are watching an opportunity pass by that your parents would absolutely kill for, but to actually make this successful and to capitalize on opportunity, there's more competition now. It's not 2016, it's not 2017 anymore. This is not a blue ocean anymore. It's a time for when you are competing for the prize. There are other people who want to take your lunch money. There are other people who want the results as badly as you do, if not more. So coming into this, just as Josh said, you absolutely have to have that mentality. Otherwise, there is no point. You have to want to outcompete everybody. You want to have to outwork everybody. This is not a casual, fun, happy 3 to 5 hours a day thing, right? Maybe a year into it, maybe 2 years into it. I did that myself. I was making 8 to 12K a month, working 3 to 5 hours a day, maybe 2, 3 years into it. But that was years into it. And that was from hundreds and thousands of hours of work, right? Thinking, living, breathing this stuff. So to kind of capitalize on that point or add to it, I completely agree. And furthermore, the parent stuff as well. I think that's so, 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 so key. If you're watching this, your parents would kill to have the opportunity you have access to, would absolutely kill. Um, it's crazy seeing that so many people see this opportunity, high ticket sales, making money online, pass them by when your parents had to go to work, they had to grind, they had to go to university, they had to go to college, they had to do the traditional path. If you knew that you could make 10K plus a month with a year of focused effort, sacrifice, low income to be able to travel the world and have infinite scale opportunity, why would you not? I think it's absolutely insane that so many people are kind of teetering on the edge of this. Like, if you're sitting there going, maybe, should, could, like, you have to act now. There is urgency to this. It's going to get more competitive. It's going to get harder. It's getting less easier by the day. So again, I think people who see that and don't realize the hardship that their parents had to go through to live the life and provide the life that they have given you to today, you really, really, really have to observe and analyze, is this an opportunity that you want to miss out on, right? Crypto, all these other things, online opportunity is abundant, and we've never lived in such an abundant reality or world than we are today. So I truly, truly, truly think if you're thinking and sitting on the sidelines, you have to really, 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 really give a hard look at yourself of like, what am I doing? Because to me, it is absolutely insane. There's going to be 31 case studies as I upload on the channel with this one here. I've got like another 8 coming out in the next 60 days. Like we'll have 60 case studies by end of the year. Why not you, right? Why not take the jump and take the leap of faith? I'm curious if you've got any additions to that.
Yeah, look, I think, when it comes down to it, right? Like, yes, there's so much out there. Yes, there's so much doubt. Like, there's so much in your mind. But I feel like when push comes to shove, right, and you think about where you want to be in, 3, 5 years' time, right? There's no better time than now, right? And genuinely, I mean this because I was one of those people. Like, I've wanted to get into the space, Connor, like probably back when I started uni, man. Like, I was researching drop shipping, and I'll be honest with you, right? I really sat on the sidelines for about 3 years' time doing nothing, right? Because I was so unsure. But when it comes down to it, man, and when the urgency or the pain is strong enough, you realize that you just got to do it. Like, you just got to dive head first into it.
100%. Absolutely agree.
Yes, path
And
will illuminate, right? As hard as it is for you to see. Yeah.
100%. That was a bit of lag there. That was my bad. I jumped in. Um, but yeah, I mean, what do you feel have been your biggest learnings across the journey as far? We've highlighted the mindset. We've highlighted that you have to be the person before you see the person. Like, what are some other learnings you've had across your journey in the past 6 months?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Connor. I'd say, one thing, right? As much as we've talked about like, hard work, getting after it mindset, I feel like you genuinely have to enjoy what you do at the end of the day, right? Like, it's all fun and games about talking about, putting in a lot of work and effort, but you have to enjoy the process, right? I feel like every day getting up, like knowing, you are taking that right step forward in the right direction, and ultimately you're doing something that you enjoy and that you love, right? Because nothing beats that, right? If you didn't enjoy it, then you probably wouldn't be able to put in that same time and that same effort. But I think circling back to it, Connor, and I feel like you can definitely probably relate to this, and even plenty of the other mentors and gurus, even millionaires out there, like you have to have so much conviction and belief in yourself, man. Like imagine that, you're talking to like your 19-year-old self, like if you were to tell him, right, the amount of effort, time, and energy, that it takes to get there, that quote where they say you probably would never have started, right, if you did go back and talk to him. But I feel circling back to that, like you have to just believe in yourself, right? Believe in like everything you've done has gotten you to where you are today. And if you have that vision and you have that almost like picture painted out in terms of the life you want to live, like it all just comes back down to taking that action, right? And I feel like that moment, kind of when it clicked for me, man, was when, all right, this is where I want to get to, right? Like I want to be traveling, look, I want to be making money online, but what are the actual inputs required, right? So really like actually understanding and believing in that, I feel like that was that light bulb moment for sure.
I think that's huge. Having that self-belief in oneself is really, really critical and key, as again, people don't, because they're not surrounded by people that are doing the same thing. So it's very hard to believe and have that conviction in yourself, because it is, again, to most people from the outside point of view, you're being observed as being delusional, crazy, right? You're believing in something that doesn't exist, that's not there. So you will have to be seen as crazy for a little bit. If you're watching this right now, you're a complete beginner, right? You have a vision that you want to create in your mind, and no one's going to believe in it. No one's going to really support it. No one's really going to understand it until you even get results. And even then, people still will not understand. And I think that's a very good question to come back to, which is, what do you think? Well, like, what does your family think about all this? Like, what's their perspective? What you're doing? Do they think you're dealing drugs? Like, what's the go?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Connor. Yeah, like I said earlier in the interview, man, I feel like, my background, where I come from, right, in terms of, work and that sort of usual route, I feel like, initially my family were very skeptical, right? And I feel like a lot of people can definitely relate to that because, this is such a new space, right? But I think fact of the matter is like it was really hard initially to even kind of break it to them, right? Like this is what I'm doing. I'm gonna go a very unconventional path, right? I feel like convincing my mom, that's probably the hardest thing, right? But I feel like you get to that point, Connor. I'm not sure if you had to experience this, but I've spoken to a lot of other boys in the space. Like you get to that point where at the end of the day, like you have a life that you want to live, and you have that vision laid out for you. And initially, if I'm going to be brutally honest, if that means going against, what your family or what your parents necessarily think, like it will break your heart. It will probably break, your mom's heart as well, right? But all I can say, because I have come out the other side, is genuinely like you have to have that conviction and belief in yourself. And this is coming from like a very deep rooted place because, you know, they will never understand, right? Because ultimately, this is something I always thought about as well, kind of like they don't see the online space through the lens that we see it, right? Like we see it as such an abundance of opportunity, right? But for them, it's very different, right? So the fact that, we have this opportunity, right? You'd be dumb not to take it, right? So yeah, I guess circling back to, what my family thinks about it, I feel like, they're very much supportive now and they can see that proof of concept that it's there, right? But, I'll be honest, it wasn't always there, right? And fact of the matter is, that's never changed, what I've done about it, right? Like I was never going to throw in the towel. I was never going to not give this a good crack anyways. And now that I've come out the side, I can just say, like, you almost need to just, like I said earlier, do whatever it takes, right? Like, just need to believe in yourself.
Absolutely agree. So let's talk about your experience inside the RSA, the training, in general? Like, what would you say your overall feedback would be of like the training, the community, me? Let's dive into it.
Yeah, definitely. I would say, look, the training, right, in terms of the LMS, like literally everything you need. I feel like from basic beginners all the way up to setting to closing, everything's in there, right? Like I remember when I went in Connor first initially, like I was looking through the training and I was like, wow, these are fundamentals that honestly I haven't revisited in like a year and a half, right? And even that was like such a good reminder. Like I said to you earlier, you just have to be a student, right? So I feel like in terms of the training, everything that I needed to even land my first offer and do well in my first offer, right? In terms of the setting fundamentals, I went through all the materials, right? So all of the content is there. But I think I said this in our onboarding call, Connor. For me specifically, man, like those role play sessions, the Q&As where I'm able to interact with you, but also with other students, that's probably the most value I found out of it, right? Because yes, the training's great and all, but I feel like being able to talk to other boys or even ask you like questions about your experience, your journey, it builds so much conviction, like I said earlier, in the process, but it also
Mm,
just gives you so much clarity because as daunting and as scary as the situation you're in now seems, you have the support of someone in your corner who's
mm.
definitely been where you are, right? And for me, that was like the biggest game changer, right? And honestly, on a simple level, just knowing that I have you in my corner, right? If I ever needed something, could just shoot you a message. Like I can't even describe like the general what's the word that I'm looking for? Just like the conviction I had in the process because I knew I had you in my corner, man, and because I knew I could always lean on you. Like just knowing that you were there, it did the world, right? In terms of just belief and conviction. So that's what I'd say it boiled down to within the RSA for sure.
It's a very interesting perspective because a lot of people from the outside looking in and making money online, I know I used to have this perspective as well, was that it was the one bit of information, the training, the secret technique to get jobs or whatever it is. But I think that the most important thing, tying back to the exposure piece that we spoke about before, not only is it having people who meet you where you're at and who are at a level above, but having someone who has a proof of concept that can lead you, that can guide you, that you can always go back to. I cannot possibly fathom or imagine what it would be like to go through this journey by yourself without an actual coach and a mentor. Like it would be extremely difficult looking back now. Yes, the first mentorship I did wasn't fantastic, but I still got some guidance, right? If I was completely oblivious and I was using YouTube testimonials, I would have been nowhere, right? It would have taken me a long, long, long time to get to where I wanted to go, as well as everything else. Learning sales, I've had many mentors since that mentor. Being able to navigate that on my own would have been incredibly difficult. So I agree. One of the most important things is the mentor being there, the frequency that you can interact with the mentor, because a lot of people come to me for the one-on-one aspect, which, by the way, in case you're wondering, is still there and will always be there. You're always able to speak to me about literally anything at all. Professional, personal development, sales, jobs, whatever it is, I literally will be there for you. You can go look at all the highlights on my Instagram. You can look on the Trustpilot reviews. Many people say the same thing again and again and again and again and again. The difference here is you get access to me. And I'm just a guy that's been doing what you want to do for a very, very, very long time. So I understand every possible thing that you could struggle with, which is very, very key, I think. What you haven't been in other training programs, but what do you think the difference is between the RSA and everything else that's out there to help beginners with high tier sales?
Really good question. Yeah, I even remember doing research initially. The biggest thing based off like obviously I've done the testimonial reviews, like I've read on Trustpilot, even searched up so many other programs. I would say the level of and kind of not to make it weird or anything, but the level of intimacy like students have with you, I feel like that's like it's just completely different, right? Because yes, like you're in a I guess community with a lot of other students, with a lot of other people, but like you do feel very close. Like I feel very close to you, Connor. And whenever I need to lean on you, come ask you a question, like I know you're always in my corner, right? And I feel like with a lot of training programs, like yes, for sales, but even for a lot of things, like it does get oversaturated. I even remember doing research like, yeah, there's like training, but are you even meeting like the mentor on a frequent basis? Or are they just getting someone that they've hired to train you, right? And when I heard that Connor runs all the calls himself, like I'll just show you, Connor, that's what I was like, yep, all right, I'm in, right? Because I know that I'd always be able to reach out to you. So that's what I'd say, is probably the biggest thing, that intimacy, right? And who doesn't love intimacy? So
Of course. No, 100%.
yeah.
Love the way you put that. But yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Like being able to have that access and like you said, that intimacy, that intimate relationship is so,
Yeah.
so key because most of the time you're thrown into a group coaching program with a bunch of
Mm,
people you don't know. So you don't really trust what they're saying and you don't know how experienced they are. Imagine going to somebody like myself, you know that you pay a field fee to the community. You know that you're going to get direct access to me to ask any question that you want virtually at all every single day. Not wait for weeks to get a response or days, but getting a response on a daily basis. Imagine being able to speak to a millionaire, a multi-millionaire, and get to ask him questions on a daily basis. It's the same thing that applies. RSA was never designed and intended to scale past a certain threshold where I have to move to a point where other people coach you. It's always been designed with the intention to grow to a point and a capacity to where I can always coach people one on one and get that one on one DM aspect. Nowhere else has that. Nowhere else can do it because they all are, again, I understand they want to grow their business. They're selfish, right? They want to scale to these exponential high levels. I don't need to, right? This business provides me exactly what I'm looking for right now. So I don't need to scale past these thresholds and throw you in the deep end in a group coaching program with people you don't know, don't trust, and won't listen to. That's such a key thing that I think really differentiates us. So it's a very good point to highlight.
mm.
So, in case it isn't already obvious, how likely would you be to recommend people to the RSA? And what would you say to people that are sitting on the fence?
Yeah, really good question. I would say, look, I've been there before. I've been on the fence, right? Like, yes, I had a really good mate in a vid who's absolutely crushing it and killing it now, who was that proof of concept for me. But I think based off everything I've said, like without Connor in my corner, it's honestly really hard to even be able to have that conviction, have that belief, because you're in uncharted territories, right? Like as smart as you think you maybe are, as smart as I think I was, right? Like before I came into this, you think you can do it all, but you really can't, right? And I think not only is Connor a great mentor, like a great mate that you can reach out to, but I think just being able to be in that environment with him and everyone else, that was such a game changer, right? So I would recommend it to my mates 20 times over if I could.
Is amazing. And to be able to recommend it to friends is definitely a high achievement, I think, because if you're willing to put your
Mm,
reputation on the line with people that you're so close with, I can always appreciate that. And that's why Naveed
mm,
introduced you to me. That's why so many people
mm.
refer me to the training program and why the RSA is completely built off referral and organic. It's because we just get results for people, just like we're filming here. So to tie things off, is there any final notes, any final comments that you wanted to share with the guys in the interview?
Yeah, I would say like, you know, regardless of I guess what stage or what chapter your life you're in, I know sometimes it's quite hard to almost like look beyond the other end and think, how can this work out or how can I get to where I want to get to? I just want to say, look, I believe in you, right? Like you need to believe in yourself before anyone can, right? And ultimately, that's going to drive you to take the action every day to get the life that you want. But ultimately, having that sort of conviction, I feel like that will keep you going literally to the end of the earth, right? So I guess that's one piece of advice I'd share. That's something I live off. Like you just got to believe in it so bad and want it so bad that like other people think you're a little bit delusional or you've got blind faith because that's the case and I'm happy about it, right? So that's what I'd say.
Absolutely. Believe in yourself, take the leap, jump into the unknown. So, guys, what an amazing interview. Hopefully you appreciated the wisdom that Josh dropped on us today. I think there was a lot of really good takeaways from someone who's gone from nothing to something really quickly. So hopefully you found it valuable. if you want to end up like Josh, if you want to end up like the rest of our case studies in the YouTube channel, there's a link below down in the description to book a call, fill in an application. It'll take you 3 to 5 minutes. Again, I say this in every interview. If you're asked, and you probably will be asked, why do you want to join the RSA? And you just put make money or non-applicable, we will cancel your application 110%, myself or my team. So make sure you put a bit of effort in that, and we'll see if you're the right fit for the RSA. Again, the reason why we get such great results is we work with such great people, and that's why, again, our dream clients come from the YouTube channel. You know who you're meant to be, you know the right standards, you know the right beliefs from being able to see some of our great clients on the case study interviews. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the interview, and we'll see you in the next one.